Welcome all to our SEAC meeting. We're going to call our meeting to order now. We'll start off with roll call. Maybe start off with Andrea.
Good evening, everybody. Andrea McCauley, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services.
Donna Edwards, Trustee for Ajax.
Kyla McKean,
Ontario.
Okay.
Russ Davidson, I'm a Vice Principal at Ajax High School representing DSAA.
Imran Syed, Principal in Pickering, representing DISA.
Hi, this is Elizabeth. I'm representing the Ontario Association for Families of Children with Communication Disorders.
Quincy James, Principal from West Creek Public School, representing DISA.
Claudine Burrell, representing Autism Ontario.
I see Craig there.
Yeah, Craig Cameron, member at large.
Okay. Is Tara on? Is Rowan on? Okay, Eva Kyriakides, Association for Bright Children and SEAC Chair. Do we have Kathy Keaty on? Okay. We currently have regrets from Christine Thatcher, trustee. And I would like to start off the meeting with welcoming our guests on YouTube and the acknowledgement that the Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school boards and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous people. Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is in these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Before we move to approving the agenda, I would like to propose an addition to item 8A, businesses arising from the minutes, and add to that new business. Can anybody make a motion to add that? Carolyn, second? Donna, all in favor? Great. Okay, looks like our motion is passed. Hi, Rowan.
Hi, everyone. Apologies.
Okay. All right, so the item is added. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda then?
Sure, I can bring forward that motion.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Seconders? Carolyn? All in favor? Excellent. Okay, so the motion is passed. Then we will move on to the approval of the minutes May 21st. Has everybody had a chance to read those minutes and any questions or concerns with them? No questions or concerns? Can we get a motion to approve the minutes then? Donna, seconded by Carolyn. All in favor? Excellent. Looks like that motion is passed as well. Then we are moving on to the inclusive student services report that was sent out via email. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read that. Are there any questions with respect to the inclusive students services report?
Eva, Kyla's just going to provide a little bit of additional information on a couple items.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Well, please.
There we go. Sorry, just making sure my mic was working this time. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things off of the report that you have available to you. So one would be the processes during distance learning. And that would be that over the course of these past few weeks of distance learning, we've had to reconfigure a variety of different processes and supports, as you are aware. But to help the system with these shifts, we've developed 3 significant resources to date that are available on the DDSB website now. And that is the IEPs for distance learning document, IPRCs in distance learning, and transitions during distance learning. So these have been integral resources for our teams to be able to work with families and are available on the public side of the DDSB website for all families to reference. We've also in this past week launched AdraCare. Took us a number of days to sort out the many pieces involved there, but important for us to have a secured platform to host IPRCs in particular, as well as move to some virtual service. So we have been able to, with the addition of AdraCare, as well as the use of teleconference, begin to engage in the many IPRCs that are needing to be finished and completed. So those are all in motion this week, and we've seen a huge number of them completed over the last few days. In terms of professional learning opportunities, of course, we've continued to look for silver linings to COVID, and one of them has been that we've been able to leverage a number of partnerships between our departments within the board, but as well as our community partners. In the past few weeks, we've been connecting in particular with Grandview Children's Center, who provide our occupational and physiotherapy, as well as some speech and language pathology. And so we've developed 3 key collaborated and co-prepared professional development sessions for particularly our youngest learners, those coming into year 1 or year 2 of kindergarten, with a focus on sensory and self-regulation, self-help skills, tricky transitions, and anxiety and stress management. And that's been a great opportunity for us to leverage this new partnership and also support our youngest learners as they come into school. And we've also had the opportunity to connect with a number of other departments, including curriculum, and focused on some professional development for resources like BAS, LLI, and Prime that we use quite frequently in the mainstream. But we have really focused on having our special education teachers trained to use these in an ongoing method of assessment and targeted interventions. And then as well, we've looked at our educational assistants and provided a number of new professional development opportunities for them through the partnership of innovation, curriculum, professional services, and other inclusive student services staff, including our educator device program, which has allowed us to actually deploy devices to educational assistants and other employee groups at home once they've completed all courses. And a recent focus on the Living Work Start program that has provided training to help keep others safe from suicide, as well as a number of other real-time and on-demand modules for various topics. So we would like to highlight just in that report that as of June 8th, 566 Durham District School Board staff had completed the Living Work Start training program, and another 171 are in progress to complete. We also wanted to take a moment and just revisit. We've spoken before about our ministry pilot to support the transition of students with developmental disabilities. This was a 3-year pilot and we're in year 3. And so we wanted to be able to bring back to the attention of SEAC the layers that have been added in the final year and what that has looked like. We are hopeful that we will actually receive an extension on this project, but we have not heard that. But at this time, we have submitted our report to the ministry, and Sade continues to be an essential person who's supporting the transitions of our students with developmental disabilities. And the data that has been collected is what I wanted to share with you tonight, particularly as the focus has been on our students as they move through high school and a pathway to life beyond high school. So within our report, we were able to identify that 615 students were actually supported by Sade through her role as a transition coordinator. And these students would have been registered in our developmental programs, our practical learning programs, or the transition to work. 142 of the students currently accessing these programs have a specific identification of a developmental disability. And as we approach the end of this school year, 44 of our students are moving on to life beyond high school. And we were able to gather the data as we supported integrated transition meetings. 21 of them will move to a community pathway support program. 5 of them will be moving to a post-secondary education, most of them into the CICE programs at Ontario colleges. 12 will be moving to the world of work, and 6 have not yet finalized their pathway plan, but Sade will continue to work with them and support their connection with community supports. We also wanted to note that 106 transition meetings occurred that involved a community programming partner. This is a really important statistic because one of the most significant messages we heard from Community Living Durham was that they were not at the table for integrated transition meetings as often as they would like, and through the advocacy and connection with Sade, we've increased this number significantly. It's gone, I think the last report I had was over 100% shift and improvement. 3 transition meetings involved a culturally specific community partner, and 98 students with developmental disabilities have been supported with work readiness programming over the last year. So we just wanted to be able to give you that update. When we know more about what the pilot may or may not extend to, which again, we cross our fingers, Sade has been instrumental, we will definitely be able to bring that information back to SEAC.
Thank you, Kyla. Does anybody have any questions for Kyla with respect to that? Yeah, Hannah?
I just needed a moment to turn on my mic here. Am I on now?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sure. It just needed a moment to turn on. So Kyla, are you also speaking to the new funding that was mentioned in the Inclusive Services report, or is that going to be coming from Andrea?
Yeah. Hannah, we've included it in the administrative update, and we may want to do that before the open discussion, just so you have the framework.
Okay, great then. That was my question.
Great. Rowan? You're next.
Well, yeah. So I just wanted to verify there were a lot of great numbers there, Kyla, and I was just wondering if we could get some type of the report. You said that was sent out. Is there possible to get that information on in a hard copy or soft copy?
Aaron, I think it's going to be included in the minutes from this meeting.
Perfect. Very specific. Good. Thank you.
Great. And Donna was next with a question.
Oh, interesting. I just found out that if you have the chat up, you can't get your mic up. Anyways, Rowan asked the one question, but I just wanted to say that I also shared the IPRC and IEP resource to my Standards Development Committee, and I've gotten several comments back of what a good resource, and it's going to be attached to our document. So I just wanted to pass that on to you as far as that's concerned. there's one other question. Now I've forgotten. Okay, I'll come to me eventually.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions with respect to the Inclusive Student Services report?
I had
Okay.
another one, Eva.
Sure.
So I was just wondering, I wasn't able to find that transition planning resource. I was able to find the other ones. And when I clicked on the Inclusive Services report, I wasn't sure. Where is that available, Kyla?
Oh, okay.
It should be posted on the DDSB website itself. So all of those 3 resources are now listed in the Inclusive Student Services section of the DDSB website.
Okay, I tried to find it. Okay, so maybe I'll just ask for a link through Diane. Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, okay. Thank you, Andrea. Any other questions with respect to the student services, Inclusive Student Services report before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, fantastic. Then we can move on to the presentation and input session.
Okay, thank you so much. So we want to thank Andrea, Superintendent Macaulay, for inviting us to come to you tonight to talk about the French as a Second Language Review of Programs that Durham District School Board is undertaking at this moment. We have a short presentation that we would like to share with you to give you some context to our FSL programming here at DDSB. So my name is Margaret Lazarus. I'm the Superintendent for French Curriculum, and I have with me Sarah Mitchell, who's our French facilitator. She's the one that's presenting the presentation, and Shannon Wood, who is our FSL coach. So the next slide, Sarah. So the Ministry of Education's mandate for FSL is that students in English language school boards will have the confidence and ability to use French effectively in their daily lives. And aligned with this overarching vision and subsequent goals that you see, they have 3 goals aligned to this vision: increasing student confidence and proficiency, increasing the percentage of students studying in FSL into graduation, and increasing student, educated parent, and community engagement in FSL. Aligned with this overarching goal are the principles intended to foster a common understanding of the importance of the ability to speak French and understand French for all our students. The overall goal of any FSL program is to enable our students to communicate and interact with confidence in French. Students develop the knowledge, skills, and perspective they need to be successful in a bilingual and a very racially diverse Canada, as well as a rapidly changing economy, allowing them to gain a competitive edge when entering the workforce. So French for our students in Canada is very important. It's also important for the kids to learn that we do have 2 languages in our country, 2 official languages, and in learning and taking FSL, they will learn that language and also be able to communicate to others and learn about other cultures in our country. The intent of FSL is for students to develop a strong foundational skill in oral communication, reading and writing, so that they can become effective communicators in the second language. So DDSB, we offer 2 FSL programs, Core French and French Immersion. And Core French is usually in a single track English school, or it can be in a dual track French immersion school. So that's French immersion can be in a single track or a dual track, and Core French is generally in a single track English school. But once, as I said, it can also be in a French immersion school in the English section of the French immersion school. We have 10 dual track elementary schools, and we have 7 single track French immersion elementary schools. In the secondary panel, there are 7 dual track secondary schools, but no single track French immersion school at the secondary level. This year we had 28,405 students in core French and 13,169 students in French immersion programs. In our board, French immersion is open to all students who would like to have the program. In other boards, we hear the system, they have a cap to their program or they have the lottery system, but in our board, it's an open program for anyone who wants to take it. And so we see in core French, it's mandatory from grades 4 to 8. Students must accumulate a total of 600 hours by the end of grade 8. And we know that in high school, there's one mandatory credit in in French for the core French. And students may continue after grade 9 and take it to grade 12. In French immersion, it's offered in a single track or dual track, as I said before. 100% in grades 1 to 3 is taught in French. 100% of the instruction is taught in French. And from grades 4 to 8, 50% of the course's content is taught in French. Students may continue with French immersion in secondary school, where the ministry has, the requirement is to complete 10 FI credits towards a French immersion certificate. So why is the DDSB pursuing an FSL review of its programs? We want to examine the challenges and successes of the two programs, absolutely, and from key stakeholders' perspective, and you, of course, being one of our key stakeholders, and others are parents of our students, our administrators, teachers, our support staff like educational assistants, and just interested person in the community. So we really want to get a robust view of what our programs and how our stakeholders are interacting with our programs. So it's a comprehensive environmental scan of the FSL program is what we're undertaking. And we want to look at, as I said, the successes and the challenges, but also to identify program needs and recommend strategies for moving forward with improvements to our program. So we want to examine trends in the past 5 years, which shows an increased demand for French immersion in our board. And the enrollment currently is outpacing teacher capacity. Both core and FI programs are experiencing teacher shortage. This is an issue not just in our board, but it's an issue across the province and across Canada as well. And it's really disheartening because we're all seeking the same small pool of French teachers that are graduating from Teachers College, and it's becoming very difficult to staff our French immersion schools as well as our core French. We also want to look at the attrition rates. For example, in grade 9 core French this year, we had an enrollment of 1,385 students. But by grade 12 of this year, and we're just looking at the stats for this year, the number was 439. That was in core French. So we want to know why our kids leaving, and so the French review will certainly give us some answers that we're looking for. The data is quite similar in French immersion as well. In grade 1 this year, we had a total of 1,056 students enrolling in French immersion in grade 1. In grade 8 this year, we had 733. So we see already that there's a reduction in the number of students enrolled in French immersion. And by grade 12, in our grade 12 year, we had 400 students. So we want to explore reasons for this attrition rate. We're also experiencing enrollment pressures in dual track schools as enrollment in the English stream of the dual track of the French. So in a dual track French immersion school, you've got an English stream and you've got the French stream. And what we're noticing is that the French immersion is sort of squeezing out the English stream. That's because as students leave senior kindergarten in dual track schools, most parents are opting for the French immersion program in the school, and therefore it's reducing the number of children who are in the English program. So for example, one of my schools last year, there were only 10 grade 3 children in the French immersion, in the English stream for grade 3, which isn't boding well for some of our dual track schools. So other areas that this review is going to examine is staffing, program viability for all students, like equity of access for all students, ELL, our ESL, our students with special needs. And this leads nicely, of course, to the purpose for your committee. FSL programs we know are for all students. And we know that in 2015, the lack of students with special education needs and ELL in French programs across Ontario prompted the Ministry of Education to address this issue, and they created the document, including students with special education needs in French as a second language. It's French for all. We know that in our board, across all of our schools, we know that 19% of our students are identified across our board. But in our French immersion schools, only 6% of the students are identified as students with special needs. And we're just trying to reconcile 19% across all schools, but in French immersion schools, only 6%. Then we go to our dual track French immersion schools. Our dual track schools, 25% of all the students in dual track schools are identified. And the French immersion section of a dual track school, once again, is just 6% of the students who are identified as students with special needs. So we're hoping that through the review, we're going to find out answers. Why is there this anomaly? We sort of know some of the reasons, but we want the data to speak for us. And throughout the surveys that we will give to teachers, parents, administrators, we were hoping that the answers will come out to us very, very vividly. So we know that French is for all, and the document states that all students, we know that all students can succeed. We know that teachers are to meet the individual needs of students in FSL as they do in other English subjects. We know that success comes in many forms and many different pathways. And the Ontario Equity Plan says that all students, parents, and community members should feel welcomed and respected in all programs. And this extends, of course, to our curriculum as well. So we're looking at this review to look especially at our students who have identified needs, to find out how they are being supported in French immersion programs, and if they are leaving, why are they leaving our programs to go to the English stream. The ministry also produced a welcoming English language learners into FSL, and the same premise for our ELL students is what is applied to our students with special needs. They're not in the program in numbers as we think they should be, and we know that with ELL learners that prior language learning can facilitate and accelerate further language learning. So we want to also explore that aspect in our review, that many ELLs are motivated to excel in FSL, but we don't see them in great numbers in the program. So we conducted a community and family thought exchange. And a thought exchange, if you're not familiar with it, is a crowdsourcing sort of survey that helps us gather information from the community. So participants are asked to share their ideas in response to a very open-ended question. And the open-ended question that we use, and some of you may have participated in this thought exchange if you are community members or if you have children in DDSB schools, but the open-ended question was share your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions on how the DDSB can meet FSL programming needs while balancing the needs of all students for high-quality, inclusive education. So that was the question that was posed. The survey went online, and we communicated the survey to our community and also to our staff members. So once the participants have shared their own ideas, they're asked to rate the thoughts that others provide on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, based on how much they agree with the ideas or how important they think that idea is. So this graphic that you see on your screen right now are the words. It's a word cloud that demonstrates for us the thoughts that came up frequently as our community parents and our families and community were completing the thought exchange. So as you can see, courses, support, resources. So the larger the word is, the more frequent that word came up in their responses to the thought exchange. So this thought exchange gives us an idea of the concerns, the issues, the successes that the community values. And so, and as we send out surveys to our stakeholder groups, and we will be sending other surveys out, we're going to look at these words and then tailor surveys to dig deeper into the issues and concerns of our community. And so this thought exchange certainly gives us an idea of the kinds of questions that we need to drill down on with them to get at the meat and to get at the important issues that concern our community and to know where changes need to be made. So tonight we want to give you an opportunity as the SEAC committee to share your ideas with us. Sarah Mitchell, our FSL facilitator, and Shannon Wood will take you through the next part of our presentation where you get to actively participate by sharing your concerns for the students with identified as the students with special needs, to share your concerns with us that we will certainly take back and address as we are completing this review. So I'm going to pass this over now to Sarah and Shannon, who'll take you through the next part of our presentation.
Thank you. So you are seeing now a QR code. I don't know if you've used Padlet before, but it's a really neat resource that you can use to garner feedback online. So if you have a phone, there's a way to access it by QR code. So you can scan the code with your camera on your phone, and then it should open up a Padlet or say open Safari and take you to the Padlet. The other way you can access it is via the link below, and Shannon, I believe, has put that in the chat box. Shannon, has that gone in the chat box for them?
I just put it in.
Perfect. So if you would like, you can access it that way. So I'll give you a minute. I'll leave this slide up for another 30 seconds or so, and then I will actually go into the Padlet and we can see what we're asking you to do. So really, we want to garner your feedback tonight. Okay, so hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to either scan it or take the link down. As I said, Shannon's put it in the chat box, so you can also just copy and paste the link from the chat box, because I am going to exit out of the slide now so I can take us into the Padlet.
I think you can also just click on the link in the chat box as well.
Perfect. Okay, so now this should take you to this Padlet right here, and we are looking for your suggestions as the committee, as members of the SEAC committee, to help us. So how can we as the DDSB meet the needs of identified students or students with special education needs in FSL programming? So I want you to think possibly of French immersion or core French, possibly your own child's experiences or things you've heard. Just give us your feedback. And the way you're going to do that is you click on this plus sign, and it will bring up like a little sticky note. And as you start typing, it basically will populate the Padlet. So we should soon start seeing people, we should start seeing sticky notes come up. So I'm just going to do a test just to show you. So when I do that, you should see my sticky. Good, we have some things coming up. You will also have the opportunity to rate each other. So if this is something you really agree with, you can rate it using a star system. Okay, so that is an option too. So if there's something that someone else has said and you are really in agreement with what they've said, you can rate it a 4 or 5 star. Okay, so I'm going to give you that option. I will take my test out now. So if you do put something up and you're not happy with it, you just click on the 3 dots, and then you can see down here it says delete post, and you can just take that off. Great. This is excellent feedback. So I'm going to leave this going. I imagine we can keep this up for, you know, this Padlet will stay up really for the next little while. So if for some reason you think of something else, just take the link down, maybe write it down or copy it onto a notepad or something, because this is something you can revisit. So if you think about this a little more, I know it's kind of on the spot right now, and something comes to you, please feel free to come back and visit the Padlet and add your thoughts. We would really appreciate that because we really value your feedback. I'm just going to get out of the Padlet now and bring us back into the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah and Shannon. So we know that this is just the beginning. We've just started the French review, and we have further opportunities for our community to give their input to our French review. And so we've listed on this last slide there will be some public consultation sessions that we will hold in each region of our board. That's to be determined. They had originally been scheduled for May and June, but because of COVID and school closures, we've had to sort of rejig our schedule. But we're hoping that in the fall, we'll be able to have some semblance of a public consultation. And I have one of our subcommittees looking at how we can do that, keeping in mind social distancing and all the requirements that our health, our Durham Health Health Department would require. So we are looking at that, and they'll be held in all the regions, but you will know the dates ahead of time and be able to plan accordingly. We're also going to be sending out a parent and a guardian survey again to our community, but this time there'll be specific questions that we will be asking to garner your answers, so that we can streamline the recommendations that we will make at the end of the review. We want to be sure that we've given parents enough opportunity, as many opportunities as possible, to give their input, so that when we are coming up with recommendations, your voice will be taken into consideration. If you're not able to attend a public consultation session or participate in the survey, should it come out when it comes out in the fall, we have an email address that you can take down, fsl@ddsb.ca. You can email your concerns, your suggestions, your challenges with our program at that address, and we'll be sure to respond in a timely fashion. And if that again is not enough and you want to actually connect with somebody by phone, we've also included a phone number, 905-666-6092, where you can leave a message, and your concern or your recommendation will be recorded and will be considered as we are completing the report. We want to thank you for your attention and for listening to our presentation this evening, and we are available for questions should you have any at this time.
Does anybody have any questions for our presenters?
I do, Eva. Did you see my hand?
I just see it now. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know in some of the reports and the executive summaries, there were some discussions about changing, there are lots of solutions that were offered or looked at in different boards already across Ontario. Is there anything that Durham is specifically looking at or exploring significantly?
So what we are trying to do with this review is we don't want to go in with our preconceived ideas. We want to hear from our parents. We want to hear from our teachers. We want to hear from our administrators, our students. And once we've gotten all the data together, then we're going to look at it and look to see what the voices are saying, and then make recommendations for our system.
Okay.
But we have looked at what other boards have done, and certainly we will take all of that into consideration as we're bringing recommendations forward at the end of the process.
Okay, and I mean, I just wanted to add, I think one of the great things about the Durham District School Board is that it is actually open to everyone for the French immersion and as well as the core French. I have been in districts, specifically in BC, in the Vancouver area, where it was hard to get in, and I think there were equity issues that came out of that as well. So I just wanted to add my voice to say I actually really think that idea is great, and I hope it continues.
Thank you for that. And we want to hear that, but those are the voices that we want to hear, because the thing about Shannon, myself, and Sarah is we're very passionate about French as a second language. So we are really very interested in making sure our kids get the opportunity to learn the French language. And you're right, there are other boards that are capping it 25% of it can't exceed 25% of the grade one enrollment, for example. But it is open for everybody. But that also comes with pressures, because once we make it open for everybody, then it's how are we going to staff the classes with qualified teachers? That's one of the issues that we really have to look at.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Donna, you have a question?
Yeah, just more of a couple of comments. I mean, one of the reasons why we started the FSL review was because of an issue around programming and boundary changes within Pickering, but we had seen those pressures as far as around the increase of number of students and somewhat moving out the local English program. So Margaret is very right. There are caps in some places, and in other places there's lotteries as well used in order to limit students in, and we very much, I know trustees across the table very much see the benefits of FSL, and we share some of Margaret's views as far as like really wanting to promote FSL and considering, you know, French is our second official language, but there are pressures and costs and some of the funding, and one also is labor, and I know that OPSPA put out did a bunch of research and there's a document called Meeting Labor Market Needs for French as a Second Language Instruction in Ontario. It's available on the OPSPA website, but they did a bunch of research and looking at ways to get additional teachers and meeting the labor market, but it's a pressure across the province, and that's sort of the other question from that has come to trustees. If that we don't have qualified teachers, how can we provide a quality French program without the teachers there, resources there? So the input that we're looking for is basically through this is to help us understand what our community wants, and so that we can support programs.
Donna, Carolyn had a question as well.
Yes, again, just a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Just a comment. I'm really happy to see that this review is being done, and especially if there is a look at encouraging the participation of identified students. I know that I have heard, and I've sort of experienced this myself, when people are wanting to put their children in French immersion, a lot of times they're discouraged because the resources potentially won't be there. Even if they're there now, they may say, well, we're not sure that we'll have teachers in the next couple of years to be able to, or EAs to be able to support students. So I'm glad that that's being looked at, because I think a lot of parents would like that opportunity, but they're discouraged. They're kind of scared that if their kids need support, they'll really opt for getting them that support in the English stream rather than maybe having that support lost somewhere along the line as they move up through French immersion. So I mean, it's great that that's being looked at, and I think there's a lot of parents who probably have a lot to suggest and to say about some of those things. So that's great to hear. As somebody who's done French all of my life, all through school with a degree in French, working in French, I'm really happy to hear this.
Nice. Good. Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions with respect to this section? Okay, so, oh, one more from Hannah. Sorry, Hannah, I can't always see you on my screen. So yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Hannah.
There's a little bit of lag. There's a little bit of a lag for me when I try to turn on the mic. So my question was just going a little bit back to my previous discussion. Margaret, you said that you guys haven't made any plans. I just wanted to kind of put out there that I hope you guys will also bring this back to us once there are some plans around it. I assume you will, but I just wanted to you know, put that out there as well in terms of, because I think once there are some solutions, I think it would be great for us to be able to provide any thoughts that might help as well. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Okay, absolutely. And Superintendent Macaulay will be sure to tap me on the back.
Does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. Moving on then to business arising from the minutes from our last meeting. The finalization, the business arising was to do with the finalization of the list with respect to the list of topics for our open discussion meetings. And that was circulated to the if that was circulated to the group on May 25th. So hopefully there was that looked good to everybody. I didn't get any emails back, so I suspect that list seemed great. So that was that, and there was no other business from the minutes. The new business that we have is with respect to the possibility. I think Andrea had sent out around an email on our behalf to ask with respect to adding a July 7th SEAC meeting to discuss the budget. We don't have the numbers yet, so from the ministry, so we would need to make a motion to add that meeting, and technically that would be a good thing to do, because with respect to the regulation, we are one meeting short, having had to cancel our meeting in March. So we were technically in violation of that regulation as it was. So this would rectify that on our behalf. But if everybody is okay with that, we would need a motion to add that meeting on. So does anybody have any questions with respect to that? Carolyn?
Just confirming, that's the July 7th, that's a Tuesday though, right? It's not a Thursday like our normal meetings, just because of when the other meeting falls, right?
Yeah, that's yeah, because the presentation would be on the 8th. Okay. Which Tara has kindly offered to do. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, can we have a motion, somebody make a motion to add that meeting for next month? Hannah, anybody, any seconders? Claudine, all in favor? Okay, so great. Looks like our motion is passed. moving on then to our open discussion period, and that was with respect to discussion on transitions for students going into September, whether it's into a new school year or into high school or out of high school, and how that's going to work, especially during these times, and any concerns that people might have with respect to that. So does anybody have any anything that they'd like to bring up with respect to concerns regarding transitions, or questions they've had in the community with respect to transitions? Go ahead, Rowan. Craig, yours next.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of just understanding. I know pre-COVID, I guess what we're calling it, we sort of had plans, but then it was just a matter of survival. And I think when we had to reprioritize, that was still a priority, still on the list. But I just wanted to hear what we're actually doing. I know with respect to the LD community, from what I understood, there's a sense from them that, well, if I'm going to pass anyways, I don't necessarily need to do anything. And sort of that communication, and I don't know if it's necessarily from our end, but it's just, it started to subside. And I don't know what they know. I don't know what, you know, the district is doing to sort of keep that communication so that they do know what their options are. So I think I just wanted to get a better sense of what exactly, you know, I know even what's going on now is different from what was going on, let's say 2-3 weeks ago. So just to sort of get an update would be appreciated. Thanks.
Aoife, can I propose that you take the questions, and then between Kyla and I, we can loop in, and then with the support of our administrators as well. Eva, you're on mute, I believe.
Sure, that's great, Andrea. I'm not sure. Does somebody want to take Rowan's question?
I'm suggesting that we take the questions of all SEAC members, and then Kyla and I can kind of cluster and also do a lean into some of the information that will come through the admin report. But then we can make sure that we capture and get everybody's thinking.
Oh, so we just want to go through and get everybody's questions ahead, and then
if you don't mind, because I think it's really important that we hear from SEAC members.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody to lose their train of inquiry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, because I sort of had a list of people who were going to ask questions afterwards. So the next question would have been from Craig.
Hi, everybody. Mine is not actually a question. It's just a it's from a student, and the last name might give it away as to what student this is, but it's a grade 8 student. Hi, my name is Sam Cameron. I am a grade 8 student who is graduating from the French immersion program at Julie Payette and transitioning to grade 9. I, however, unlike some of my classmates, I'm not going through the traditional feeder system, which would take me to Donald A. Wilson. Sorry to the French immersion folks there, he's leaving the French immersion. And transitioning back into the gifted program, I was briefly at Jack Minor and liked French more, so went back to French, but now I'm going back to gifted. This unorthodox path has led me to consider the situations that could be faced by others taking the same route by not following their feeder route. As we all know, right now is a difficult time for everyone with the pandemic and all. School has been canceled for in excess of 3 months now, and despite the efforts made by teachers and staff and the DDSB to help us students continue our learning online, it is clear that we will have missed some parts of the curriculum going into next year of our learning journey. This will likely be especially hard on students transitioning into high school next year, and time hopefully will be set aside in class to help make up for any potential learning gaps that the new grade 9s will have to endure. This may leave some students falling between the cracks. I'm thinking of particularly non-feeder school students who could end up not getting the opportunities to catch up as they would if they were going into their feeder school. I just wanted to share a student voice, and I'm going to summarize the rest of it. Is just that concern that I know that there's prep for a block of students who may be going to high school, who the receiving high school kind of knows that there will, maybe they're a little bit behind on some math or something, so that the high school can sort of address that gap. Some of the students that may be scattered, he just wants to put the voice out there that there will be people coming in from different angles with different needs, and that they should not be forgotten about in the process. So that's, yes, my son who wrote that himself. It's actually about 4 pages long. I'm not going to continue reading it at this point because you get the gist, okay? Thanks for listening.
Craig, I would suggest that if you forwarded that to Diane, if you wanted that voice heard by all, she could circulate his full letter for us to see. So, Hannah, you wanted to add in a question?
Yes, that's right. And so the question was just whether the school board has received some of the recommendations that SEAC Kids put out yesterday in regard to recommendations for transitioning back to school, and with some of the children that are connected with SEAC Kids. And so I just wanted to inquire about that. And
Great. Claudine also has a question to add to the list.
Hi, mine's more of a comment. I've been talking to a lot of families who have children who are diagnosed with autism but are entering school for the first time. So their confusion and fears about their children's needs being met within the classroom, but also pre-pandemic, we had guided tours. You got to get a feel of your classroom. You got to tour the school, and those things are missing, which also soothe their children, right? As well as they have the added frustration of trying to figure out, is it safe to send my child to school due to the pandemic? So it's more of a comment than a question.
Okay. I saw that Carolyn had her hand up.
Yes, just a question on if there's anything, this is more for the high school students, so the ones that are in grade 9 and 10 now, if there are any programs during the summer that can help them already. We know all the students are kind of at a disadvantage. There's a huge learning gap that's probably going to be horribly evident in September. But for those that are already struggling, and some who, quite frankly, during this time of online, learning from home, have either disengaged or really fallen behind, are there any supports for them to sort of catch up or practice or acquire some of the knowledge or skills that really they're missing? Because even if everybody's going to be back in September sort of behind the 8 ball, these students are going to be even further behind because they were struggling to begin with, and now they're going to be that much further behind. Are there any things this summer, resources maybe for parents, that they can help their children sort of try to close that gap a little bit, or maybe rebuild their confidence after having gone through the online learning and maybe not being as successful at it as they could be? I know it's a long question, but
Okay, does anybody else have any questions to add to this, to add to the list?
I think Andrea had her hand up.
Right?
I think Andrea had her hand up. I'm not sure if that was a signal that she's ready to answer, or if she had another question to add.
I'm not sure. Andrea, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think our teams have lots of questions that we're working through right now. But I think that is very thoughtful and comprehensive consideration for the kids and families And so Eva, through you as chair, if you don't mind, I think we'll pause and then get some responses back to SEAC on a few of those items. Again, you always speak with such high consideration to each individual child. So thank you. And Craig, thank you to your son for sharing that. I look forward to reading the longer letter. In all honesty, please thank him for sharing that with all of us. If I can, I'm going to kind of start with Carolyn and work backwards. And Kyla, just kind of giving you a heads up in terms of the early years question coming your way because of the lead with Grandview on that. So in terms of our students, and I think it kind of goes from Rowan's question to Carolyn's and kind of bookends. I think one of the important things to remember is this has been a global pandemic. So COVID and school-related closures didn't hit one municipality in Durham. This has been a global response needed. And so with that learning traction, although it reads for different kids in different ways, absolutely, and different families have moved through this in very different ways. We know that kids are entering our classrooms very differently. This is not a restart to February. Kids have moved through different experiences. For some, these have been incredible life lessons on resiliency, creativity, nature learning outside. For others, this has been crisis management or them taking responsibility for food and income continuity for their families, particularly Carolyn, when you reference our high school students. We know that many of them are sole income earners at this point for their families, and that may continue into the fall as well. We are expecting direction from the ministry by the end of this month in terms of what schools expected to look like in September. But in the meantime, you can imagine the number of tables that have been running through various considerations. So how will our clinicians interact with students? How many schools will they be able to physically be in a week? How will we move our students? In Durham, we transport over 30,000 students a day when we're up at full run between the Catholic Board and the Durham District School Board. We're in partnership in those conversations with the Durham Catholic Board because of that integrated transportation planning. So all of our schools will take that into consideration, because I think a thread through all of your questions was how will kids be received and supported at the start of the next school year. And keeping in mind as well, we do have 2 schools coming on board August 4th as well with the modified calendar, and then 3 more high schools the week before that September date. So once we get the school year calendar approved from the ministry, we get our funding for next year and the details of the plan, work with health and start those plans in motion. But the detailed planning has started, and our administrators have been phenomenal in starting to think through the well-being, learning, and the operational aspects of schools for kids and for staff. So that's kind of all in the works. In that though, and I'll just back up a little bit, I believe, to Craig's question in that regard. So our summer learning program for our staff this year, we're concentrating it in 3 areas. Equity. As a board, we must absolutely have at the forefront anti-Black, anti-Indigenous racism, and be really actively engaging and moving those practices forward. It can no longer be a quiet conversation, and we need all of us. And SEAC will have an incredible role in those conversations as well. And so our summer learning program for staff and our professional learning plan going into next year focuses on equity, well-being, trauma-informed practices, because informed of trauma is so different than trauma-informed practice. Just because you're aware of somebody's experience and keep that in consideration doesn't mean you're exercising trauma-informed practice. So we're moving that kind of, we had a 3-year plan, we're going to move that up as well. And then success. So we leveraged our digital program for staff and students through this time. We may be in a situation of blended environments, and so we really want to grow those practices as well. Superintendent Maliha brought forward some statistics on Monday night about our Google Classrooms and our use, and it's incredible, but we need to continue growing those practices because we're expecting fluidity as probably necessary. As many of us are aware that pandemics tend not to have one wave historically. So hopefully this one does, but it would be the first, I believe. So we do take those 3 foundations: equity, first and foremost, well-being, and then success in the redesign of our programs. In all of that design, Hannah, your point about the Hospital for Sick Kids recommendations, we were thrilled to get that documentation yesterday because I think it speaks volumes to our families. We were starting to get phone calls from many of our families, many of them who have children who have medical fragility to them, saying, we won't be back at school until there's a vaccine. And then talking to them about what some of the protocols are, again, without the commitments of the details yet, because we haven't been in a position to do so. So what we read in the Hospital for Sick Kids recommendations is support from the medical field for kids to be back in school as safe to do so with the protocols to protect them. We are so fortunate to have Hospital for Sick Kids in our backyard, or us to be in their backyard, and that expertise land locally, because it's not just a recommendation from an internationally renowned hospital. For our families, that's staff and team members attached to their individual kids. They know the doctors and nurses and clinicians by name, and so those recommendations carry weight in our community, and so we were thrilled to get them. That document has gone out to our entire operations reopening steering committee to be read prior to our next meeting. So thank you for that question. There are some summer supports. If you don't mind, I'm just going to hold that until the admin report because we are receiving just over $500,000 in Durham for summer learning supports, and I'll overview that at that time. But I think in terms of your question, the one remaining came from Claudine around the students with ASD and our first to school entry, because we haven't been able to do those welcome to kindergarten sessions. And we know quite often with our little ones and our families of students with special education needs, a lot of the transition is supporting the adults in building those trusting relationships to entrust us with the care of their child. And a lot of that confidence gets built by looking around. And we won't be in a position to do that likely in terms of having full community in our schools based on the physical distancing ratios. But Kyla and our team have been working really hard with partners such as Grandview to keep changing our early educator training programs. And so I would just ask that Officer McKee speak to that for a moment and share a bit more details than they highlight in the department report. Kai, if you don't mind.
Not a problem. So we were really excited actually to be able to leverage that partnership with Grandview. And I know that when it was presented to the Grandview team, they were equally excited at being able to work with us to support educator teams in better understanding some of those important transition pieces, but also the routines piece and understanding how to scaffold some of that. Their team member that represents their autism team was also instrumental in working with our team to look at what they felt in terms of even their previous professional development or sessions or webinars that they had offered for their families as an organization. We actually took those presentations and partnered with them to adjust them to the educator team lens. And so it was a great opportunity for us to start building that shift and that scaffold. But we've also been working with our kindergarten educator teams for the last 2 years in particular through a pilot project that had brought some early years transition support. And so we also took that as a bit of a starting off point. And so when we narrowed down the scope, we really wanted to focus on, not because we don't have all the information about what September would look like. So our focus has very much been on what are those most successful strategies and tools. And then when we have the information to put in place that gives you the specifics about how you create that tool or how you create that visual or that specific structure or strategy, then they're going to get a revisit to the content of the PD session that gives the specific details about, okay, we talked about this in a general way, we scaffolded it, we put it together in pieces as a big idea. Now that we have the information about what school will actually look like, we can talk about. So I'll give you an example. They were talking about social stories and the importance that those can play for students who are transitioning into school, not just for those students who have autism, but many students benefit from that social story, having, the pictures and faces of the team that's going to look after them. And so they talked about the idea of all of that and how important that was, but there may need to be some tweaks and additions if particular PPE is being added to their kindergarten educator team, helping those students know, why are people wearing a mask, or why are we using hand sanitizer more frequently, or those kinds of things. So they were just really looking at what are those promising and best practices within a kindergarten program, and how can we support. And it tied into those areas, which is why it got narrowed down to the sensory piece, the tricky transition piece, the anxiety and stress management. We know that for a lot of our kids, it's the transition into school, not necessarily a specific special education strength or need. And so really focusing on what can we do to help all students feel safe and welcome when they start school for the very first time. And so we're going to keep revisiting that. And we've been partnering with our early years department. They're all key. So it's been that partnership between Inclusive Student Services, Grandview, and the early years team. They've co-prepared and co-presented all of those sessions. And that was amidst Grandview also getting the go-ahead to start moving back to their next stage of a return to work. So we still managed to put those pieces together. So I think that it's a beginning stages of an amazing partnership. And this was a unique time to be able to start, but I think it's given us some traction and some valued partnership that will move forward in the future.
Thank you, Carla. Donna, I know that Donna has some information from respect to the with respect to this from the sort of the ministry level. So, Donna, go ahead.
Yes, and I think everybody had seen, because we had talked about it, is the at one point in time they the ministry had sent out sort of their framework, and wanted people to answer, and various associations answer questions around their framework for going back to school. And many of the associations, as well as different groups and trustees associations, put in their responses. And subsequent to that, the ministry also came out with some additional questions. But OPSPA's submission is now on their website as well. I'm going to have to send all these links from that. And they were quite happy to see Sick Kids framework come out at this point in time as well. Just so, and I do know that it was funny, I was just checking to see the, because of one of our letters around Max, even though that the list still doesn't look like there's very many members, I do know that Maxi has been meeting on a bi-monthly basis from one of the members in order to gather and provide advice around going back to school, as well as the Standards Development Committee that we've been sitting on. We've also had some questions asked, and we've provided advice back. So there, as Andrea had pointed out, that there are many tables that are working on things, and you know, and again, we do understand apparently the ministry is supposed to be coming out with their really what that's going to look like a little bit later on in the month. And recognizing one of the things that we've across the tables, I can honestly say, I don't think there's one table that or group of people that I've talked about that would actually think that school would return back to normal in September. It's always a hybrid model or something. There's something happening. So recognizing that virtual learning is going to be around for a while. And we've also, you know, stated in order to for parents and students and staff's mental health, we have to be able to provide them with a plan and be able to communicate that plan very, very effectively. So definitely pushing for that. And I know Andrea and actually the whole board, all the staff are working very, very hard on as soon as they get the information, they're on it and they're incorporating things. So And the same along that line is also the budget, which is really key because that's worrisome as well. In order to ensure that whatever is put in place, that it's going to be funded appropriately so that staff can put in the structures and the supports in place for our students, because it's not on, and our staff, because it's not only students with special needs that are having higher anxieties and stuff, everyone is. And that's really, and the minister has already released as preliminary about around extra supports around mental health. But we really don't know what it's going to look like. Hopefully within the next next week we'll get that a better picture of that. And I know that staff and trustees are really trying to make sure that parents and everybody is informed as soon as we have a plan, and we have been getting input, and I'm for sure across from a various groups of sources. And I know Andrea also has been working, and her group has also been working with the Barrie region, coordinating and providing advice and ideas and so forth as well.
Great, thank you, Donna. I appreciate that input. Okay, did that answer everybody's the questions that we had? Just keeping in mind the time for this evening. So, okay, we will move on then to the administration report with Andrea.
Great, thank you. So through you, Eva, pleased to bring just a couple updates. So as Officer McKee mentioned, we have launched AdraCare. We appreciate the patience of our school teams and families as the platform was secured and a DDSB specific interface built. It was based on the commitment to confidentiality and privacy of our student data that the decisions were made, and that was the platform decided. We have secured our clinical licenses for 12 months so that our clinical teams are poised for virtual care if we need to be in and out of different settings and formats next year, that we will have that as a solid footprint. In terms of our IPRCs, as of June 16th, so 2 days ago, we had 48% of our IPRCs being fully completed, with about another 20% where the meetings were completed and the paperwork was being finalized. We know a lot of our school teams are running multiple IPRCs. Sorry, Donna, in terms of AdraCare, it's a health, it was not part of the one that the ministry launched because we needed to get out ahead of that. We were all trying to work in tandem. So we are sitting at about 68%, and we know our school teams are running multiple teams in tandem and working through that. So we do appreciate our school teams with having a condensed period for IPRCs. Many of our schools, particularly our elementaries, are actually noting a higher rate of parents and caregivers participating and wanting to be part of the IPRC compared to other years, given the options of teleconference and video connect. In terms of the summer learning supports, and Rowan, I think this goes to your question as well, our ministry did make an announcement for summer learning supports for students with special education and or mental health needs, and I will send out this part of the report in advance of the minutes, so I will send it on the tail end, so you don't need to write down numbers, but we would like to, for our audience at home as well, be able to give a few of the details. So on May 29th, the ministry did announce summer learning supports for students with special education and or mental health needs, and the funding is divided into 3 buckets of funding, and the total draw for Durham is $520,334. We do not yet have the transfer payment agreement, so what we have is the book title and the chapter titles, but we don't have the content of the chapters yet that set the guidelines for how we can spend the money and any of the metrics that will be attached to that. But as we are sitting in June, we have mobilized a number of actions to make sure that we can get the supports in place for both July and August. So the first bucket of funding is for regulated mental health professionals providing direct support to students and crisis situations. So in Durham, we're coming out with a 3-tier model. So we will, just in general, to your comment, I'm again, Rowan, thank you, for how do we engage our students and keep them connected and serve all of our kids. Our regulated health professionals are creating a series of podcasts that will be available to all adolescents and the public on topics such as mindfulness, connecting with others, and just managing through crisis and support. Our next layer is continuity for some of our kids that are on direct service. And then our tier 3 is crisis support, as we are expecting that to be higher volume than in a regular summer for us. We are also putting a team in place for our transition support that I'll talk to in a minute as well. So that's kind of the first bucket, is clinical. The second bucket of funding is to support summer learning programs. So we run a very robust program through Durham Continuing Education. And instead of having multiple high schools running, we are running one high school online. And we have funded, we will have 5 special education resource teachers in place, 1 for credit recovery, 3 for our students taking accelerated courses, and 1 for the grade 7-8 SMILE program in that regard. The CERTs will be working together to run a virtual learning hub, an AR space that will be available to students starting half an hour before first bell to half an hour after last bell. They will be joined in that by educational assistance support as well, and our postings are active at this time. Our CERTs are in place pending the funding, and our EAs, the posting is live. We have 2 EAs working out of the virtual learning hub, as well as a number working where there is a higher cluster of students, academic resource, Hannah. So a specialist spec ed teacher and access to support in addition to the classroom teacher. And EAs in courses where we see a higher count of students with IEPs. So this is new for us and is based on the one-time funding, and we're really excited to have these supports put in place. In addition, one of our students will be supported by an ASL interpreter as she takes a course in August. And we are funding a GLE, which is a learning program out of our Durham Alternate Secondary School. We have a cohort of about 24 students on individual plans, and we are funding to continue their teacher into July so that they can course complete at that point. So lots going in there. The third bucket, and this is why I'm going to send it out to you in an email so you have the details, because I appreciate it's high volume to be receiving auditorily, so sorry about that. The third bucket, we're working on designing, and the ministry has committed that students will receive transition supports in the 2 weeks prior to school start. And again, we're cognizant of having 3 calendar starts in Durham. And so our funding for this, there are a lot of job titles and skill sets under the umbrella of what we know at this point from the memo. We are intending in Durham to do a distributive model to our schools so that each school can meet the needs of a number of students that are considered priority for transition support. We have not yet sent the information out to our administrators, so we're just sharing at a high level right now. But that would be enabling schools to bring staff in for a few days to have students in 1 hour or 2 hour increments that are a priority for transition supports, have specialized transition plans put into place. We also have our orientation and mobility specialist who works with our students who are blind, contracted for those 2 weeks as well. Brooke has not been able to work with students on site over the last 6 to 8 weeks and would normally be supporting students switching buildings and programs. And so Brooke has already signed on board to work those full 2 weeks. And our hearing and vision resource teachers are looking at their caseload. And as I said, we'll have our board staff in preparation for that. Our autism resource team has already, they're about 90% of the way through a transition guide to support schools as students come out of school closures due to COVID and re-enter into a school setting. And we know that the strategies that they come at as an integrated team are very targeted to our students with ASD, but benefit many. And so they're just connecting with their social work partners and speech language partners to augment that and add a mental health lens to the document And then that will be part of the information out to our school teams as well. So that's kind of the 3 buckets of summer learning, and hopefully lots of things happening for kids as we do that. And then just in terms of wrapping up the school year, because we do appreciate that although we'll all see each other on July 7th for budget, hopefully we'll have the GSNs by that point. I do recognize that this is technically the final admin report for the year, because the 7th will focus on budget. So I would just like to say thank you. Thank you to our school teams who pour compassion and skill into supporting the kids. Through this time, their commitments to well-being and success have just sprung forth in the families' stories. And I'm just really impressed by our school teams. I'd also like to thank each member of the Inclusive Student Services Department. In Durham, with the support of our trustees, we are really fortunate to work as part of an integrated team with professionals from across lots of groups who combine their skills and experience into supporting kids. And this spring, I would say that the team has absolutely shone. Sorry, I get emotional because it's our kids. So the team has shone in the details, I think, of individualization and cognizant of families, just in terms of the layers, even when there's system planning and bringing that lens of individual families. So I'm proud to be in the position I am and have the privilege of being part of the ISS team, which includes our Grove team as well. And then just a thank you to all of you. You each bring an important and unique lens into these conversations. And I think individually and together, you continue to help us shape and refine services for students and families of Durham. And so this year we acknowledge and put into the minutes your input specific to the finalization of the intervention pathway, the dress code document, and then tonight the French language review. So we'll continue to make sure that we're bringing you authentic opportunities for your input as things are in planning. Again, the voices you bring are just so incredible and thoughtful. And so with that, it's just a thank you, and this concludes our June admin report.
Thank you, Andrea. That's fantastic. We've appreciated the hard work the board has done too in this respect. Does anybody have any questions for Andrea with respect to the administration report at this time? Hannah, go ahead. I think you're live, Hannah.
Oh, I was waiting for you to, I thought you were going to say something.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Andrea, I guess I was just wondering, I mean, you mentioned a lot of the transition programs, and I wanted to bring back Carolyn's comment from earlier as well. I do think that that is also very relevant to a lot of the families that I'm interacting with, or that I'm aware of through Easter Seals, is that, you know, a lot of our children really haven't had too much progress in the during this time. And so I didn't hear a lot on the elementary level about what would be happening in terms of special education supports. Perhaps I missed that. Perhaps that's part of your planning. So I just wanted to inquire a little bit about that, and just kind of echo Carolyn's comment from earlier as well for families related to Easter Seals.
I think that question is very fair, so thank you. In terms of the summer supports, we have put our focus in our secondary students. When the funding got announced on May 29th and summer starts on July 6th, and again, we don't yet have the TPA, like the transfer payment agreement, to be able to formalize staff. We needed to kind of prioritize where we could leverage programs that were already in motion and to support. And when we get to our secondary students, it's pathway bearing. So if students have received a failing grade as of March 13th and not being able to move that, or received an incomplete, it changes their pathway if we don't leverage the opportunity for them to complete it during summer learning and enter into the 2021 school year confident in that regard. So we have put a priority on our secondary students just in terms of that. When the TPA comes through, and again, that's just the outline of how we can spend the funds, we will absolutely be looking at leveraging that. Again, when we look at the clinical model as well as the transition support model, the transition support model will be offered out to all 130 schools, elementary and secondary, and the clinical support programs in place from JK to our 21-year-olds as well. So although the learning support in the summer has the focus on our grade 7 and up, the other 2 areas of support over the summer do have a full scope of all of our students. And then we do know that working together, that all of our kids are going to need specialized transition planning, and the team's absolutely gearing up to do that already.
Thank you, Andrea. Rowan, you had a comment?
Yes, thanks. I liked the idea what Andrea meant in the clinical bucket with respect to creating the podcast. I think as I think back, sort of as a person with learning disability, my memories just, it requires a lot of work. The ability to hear this information, play it over and over again, I think provides value. I think it would be very important, one, to promote that. So to get it out to the people, because when you're young and you feel that, unfortunately, sometimes you feel inferior, you don't want to go to people that are going to tell you, make you feel less than. And so to be able to just click a button, which is what everybody does now, to hear the information that will provide you value without having to go to an actual person, I think is pretty important. So I think that promotion of that would be key. And I think if you're able to bring, these are going to be, I don't know what level of communication it's going to be at, but to have even 1 or 2 students, someone that can speak to the level, to speak to the students at their level as well, I think would provide a lot of value. I just thought it was a really good idea, as long as we get it out there so that people can appreciate it, because I know sometimes there's as many podcasts as there are snowflakes in the world, but if we don't know about them, then the value just sort of gets lost. So.
Thank you, and through you,
Thank you, Rowan. Yeah, go
Rowan,
ahead, Andrea.
thank you. Thanks for that, and I love the Connect with Kids. Again, we'll take the idea, Kyla and I, back to our colleagues on the leadership team. We are cognizant, though, that we technically, our kids are pretty close to finishing, but I think what it draws on is all of those summer students who may be accessing through that virtual learning hub, and engaging them in helping other students as well. So lots there. The idea for the podcast grew out of the fact of the attendance around the Friday story times through Instagram Live that our SLPs have been doing this entire spring, and how many families have logged on for that. And so our psychology team with social work decided maybe we could grow that and take something out to our adolescents. So I love that the idea is popcorn, and we'll definitely take your ideas back to the team as well. So thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Carolyn, go ahead. Carolyn had a question. What is our last day of high school for our students?
So the last day for new learning was June 15th, and then students are in consolidation to the 26th. So the PA days in both calendars were converted to instructional days. And so we have JK to 12 engaged in learning available to them till the 26th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I have a sort of a comment, Andrea, on the IPRCs and the video conferences with respect to that and the uptake, especially in elementary school on that. I think it would be something that would be great for the board to look at continuing, because a lot of people can't take the day off work for a 15-minute window of an IPRC, and this does allow for far more participation from families, from parents. So my understanding is that people like it. Go ahead, Andrea.
So thank you for that. So once we get through the IPRCs, we'll be going back out to our DISA and DSAA reps for feedback from administrators, because that's certainly been ours within the department. And we've even considered that within case conferences and assessment meetings as well, given geography of where people work, or even just schedules of elder care and child care at home, and the flexibility and offering that. So thank you for that. And I think it is something that as a board, we really need to consider as part of the modernization of those connect points with families.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add? Okay, so moving, oh, sorry, Hannah. Oh, great, thanks, Hannah. Moving on then to the board report with Donna.
I feel really bad because I put a comment in there. Poor Margaret has been hanging around there. Because she was part of this group, and I hope she can hear me. That they had. Good, Margaret. I'm so sorry that you've hung around and stuff, and I put you on the spot.
I do anything for you, Donna. Anything.
but I think it was one of the documents that came forward. It was an update around anti-Black racism and some of the work we're doing. But one of the documents that came across was around a release of a document around the principles around having courageous conversations about race and some of the supporting resources. And I thought it was really important, since Margaret was here, that maybe she could talk a little bit about that as part of the board report. I really appreciate it.
So that's okay, Donna. As I said, I would do anything for you because you're an amazing trustee and always advocating for kids. And I love it when you advocate for kids. And this is really about students. And so I'm part of one of my roles is to be, I work in the equity department, superintendent of equity. And we know that it's critical for our board to be responsive to events that occur in society. We know that that's part of our role as educators. And so we know what's going on in the United States. We know what happened in our own country with our Indigenous peoples. And so when we have traumatic experiences like that, it's important that we as a board be ready to provide support and resources, as well as to facilitate conversations to address feelings of outrage, sadness, defeat. And so we know that Canada is not exempt from anti-Black racism, as there are many of us who experience racism every day. And many of in our community are facing those same struggles every day. And so in order for us to be responsive, it's not just words, like we put a statement on the board, absolutely necessary that we did that, but it's not just words, we have to act. And one of the ways we acted was we created a document, Invitation to Critical Conversations about Race. And we know it's very, very difficult to have these conversations because it means that we really have to empty ourselves of ourselves and really look at how we respond to situations, look at how we interact with other people. And we know that those conversations are very difficult. And we know with a lot of our staff, we have to engage in those conversations now because we've reached a critical moment in history. And what we want our teachers and administrators, students to recognize is we can't waste this moment. So we created the document, Invitation to Courageous Conversations, and it was developed, and it's the first in a series of resources to support our staff and our students, and it focuses on how to engage in those critical conversations. And for example, the document talks about if you're going to have critical conversations about race, you first have to agree to stay engaged, because we know there's going to be some discomfort in the conversation. So you've got to agree to stay engaged. You've got to, when you are going to experience discomfort, you've got to speak your truth, not the truth of others. You've got to speak your own truth and expect and accept that there may not be answers at the end of the conversation. So we want our teachers and our administrators to understand these rules for even engaging in conversations. We've got to know it's going to be very uncomfortable, but we have to push forward because a lot of our students are affected, are traumatized by the events that they have witnessed over the last couple of weeks. And so we need to be responsive to their needs. And so there's materials in this document, and I know that Andrew will probably send it to you if she has not already done so. There's materials in the document that is useful for staff to understand the issues related to racism and how those issues contribute to marginalizations in our community. And the intention of the resource is to build organizational capacity to engage in ongoing critical conversations about the intersection of race, equity, and social justice, because truly we really want all of our students to feel welcomed in our school and to feel like they matter. Some of the things that we talk about in the document is we give definitions of ally, microaggressions, racism, anti-racism, anti-Black racism. So we provide definitions for some of those issues. We also, of those words, sorry, we also provide in the document, I'm just scrolling down for a second. We also provide questions and answers to invite those critical conversations. Questions that kids might be asking as they look at, as they watch the images on TV, as they see the protests going on, the kinds of questions kids may ask, and we provide administrators and teachers with support with answering those questions to make sure that they're being dealt with in an equitable and a just manner. We give tips for having those conversations with children. We give tips for having conversations with adults about those same issues. For example, we also talk about the importance of the ally, which are all of you sitting around the table, the ally, because this work cannot be done by those who are oppressed. It has to be a collaboration between the allies and those who are oppressed to work in this area to combat racism. And so the document, we've gotten such good feedback from our principals and our teachers about the document. It's very effective. It gives them that foundation or a starting point to have those conversations with parents and with children and with their administrators. So we're very proud of the document, and I'm hoping that you will get a copy. Andrea did promise me that she would send you a copy so you can look at the work, because having conversations is not just for children, it's me having conversations with you, you having conversations with your friends, and in that way we can rally around this time in this moment in time and see what we can do to make sure that we make the lives of our children more what do I want to say, that their well-being is really what concerns us, and to make sure that we're raising children who are comfortable in their own skin. And that's the report that I have about the resource invitation into critical conversations about race.
Thank you, Margaret. That's some great information. Yeah, before we move on to the rest of Donna's report, if we have any questions, that would be great, so Margaret can have the rest of her evening. Go ahead, Hannah.
Yeah, Margaret, I mean, I think, definitely that document sounds amazing. Look forward to reading it. And my question was just, I think when the intersection between race and disability really intersects there. And I was just wondering, one, if that's included in the document, and definitely we're talking right now, the conversations are around, racism against Black individuals as well as Indigenous. But at the same time, I think there's other races as well. And we don't want to take away from the larger discussions, because those are very significant issues. But I think even when it's an individual who is Black and has a disability, Indigenous and has a disability, plus other groups of minorities who that intersection also happens for them. I was just wondering if you could speak a bit to that, or if there's anything that you can direct us to on the document.
So the document's it's talking about intersection between race, equity, and social justice. And we know when we talk about social justice, that takes in all of the different areas in society that are marginalized. And so it's conversations that are going to be open about race, but you can bring in, it's very open-ended, you can bring in all the other different aspects of marginalization into those conversations. And that the job of a teacher, and teachers are skilled at doing this, is making sure that the needs of all the children are met when they're having discussions of this nature in the classroom. But you're right, not to take away from race, but it doesn't negate, the document doesn't negate that you can bring in other aspects of marginalization into a discussion in the classroom with children.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Margaret, really appreciate you. Oh, sorry, Donna, go ahead.
I was just going to say again, thank you, Margaret, for presenting that. But I just thought it was very timely with that document, considering all that was going around. And Hannah did bring about that intersectionality, and that I knew that it was in part of there in the document, and is brought in that's a whole social justice piece. So I appreciate you staying behind, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. So Andrea, you've got to send it to your people.
Already done. Margaret, thank you so
Great.
much for staying on. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your input.
No
Yeah,
problem.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Donna, do you have more to add?
Yeah, just quickly, as far as, of course, we also had a report around culture responsive on relevant pedagogy on human rights on LGBTQ, and you can find all this stuff is in you'll find it under the agenda. When it comes to looking for the documents, most people go looking for it and they can't find it in the minutes. It's really in the agenda where you'll find a lot of this, the material under the boards. We had an update on our annual operating plan, as well as an update on quarterly construction. And just to note that nothing really has been delayed except the Brooklyn edition. Sort of, it's been delayed, but I think that partially is because it was delayed before. We were waiting for ministry approval, but now we're looking at different requirements. So it's been resubmitted. Let's see. We also talked about looking at our hiring of our integrity commissioner, looking at going through an RFP process to provide services, but also, there was concerns to ensure that we have that cultural fit within in hiring our integrity officer. What else did we do? I'm trying to think. Of course, we recognized our student trustees that are leaving and then and going on, and we've had some phenomenal student trustees that have been very good advocates, especially this year. I found there was definitely a focus of every student, including students with special needs. So I was really, really impressed with our students, not that student trustees, but not that I am not impressed every year. They just seem to get better and better and better. They do recognize as far as the value of our students with special needs in the classroom and what they learn from them, and they are starting to extremely and considering them and their voice at the table as well, which I represent their voice. So I think that's really significant. So I really appreciated our student trustees, and we also gave out the chairperson's award, and for I just can't remember his name. Maybe Andrea might remember, but a very impressive young man that received the chairperson's award and scholarship. And that's my report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Donna with respect to the board report? No? I will echo your remarks with the student trustees. I was blown away by those young people. They were phenomenal, and continue to be. I've seen some of the stuff that Sally's put on that's been circulated on the board. Yeah, she's fantastic. They're all fantastic. Good group. Okay, so moving on then to association reports. Does anybody have an association report to provide? Nobody? Okay, Then we can move on to community concerns. Does anybody have any community concerns they wish to raise that maybe haven't been raised during the previous conversations? No? Nobody? Okay. Celebrations and successes. Does anybody have a celebration or a success they'd like to bring forward? Go ahead, Rowan.
I just want to go back to the community concerns. I don't know if this is the right place. And I'll be honest, I struggle every time I talk about this. And I would invite anybody who's trying to understand what's going on to speak to somebody who you think might be experiencing that, and allow them to like drop the gloves and just be frank. I was listening to Margaret say it's difficult to have the conversations with the young people. It's difficult for me to have conversations with people who haven't experienced it, because I've learned to tone it down, because I know you can't be too rich with it. You can't tell everything. So you soften it. You use different words, and just for some people to really truly understand it, to know. I'm not going to get into a big thing here, but I've been pulled over for driving too slow. Things that you just kind of go, but in actuality, it was because at the time, my friend was Caucasian, she was female, and it was a late experience, and the cop just saw me, and I won't get into it, but everybody, I can speak for pretty much all the Black people I know, have had at least one experience or know somebody who's had an experience. And I love the fact that the allies, that everybody's really starting to see this now, this Venn diagram of the situation with the COVID, with nothing else to distract us, no sports, no nothing, just, oh my goodness, now this hits us because we're at home, we're seeing it all in the news. Wow, this is really going on. Sure, it's been going on for how many years, but the focus is there. Just to hear the real life stories, I think will just add value to those who know it's going on, but don't, you can only get so close without actually going through it. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but to really understand how bad it is. Again, the US, we see a lot more visually, but it definitely happens here. I had a good friend refer to it as racism with a smile. So that does happen as well. And it's just a matter of hearing it and getting the bigger picture. I know some of the stuff you're just not going to hear in the news. You're going to hear it from a trusted friend, trusted ally that will say, hey, here's my experience. Just letting you know, just so you know it exists. So I invite everybody over this summer, with everything that's going on, just once or twice, ask somebody and give them the permission. Just say, I want you to be real, though. Don't feel like you're going to offend. Just let me know exactly what happened. I think that's a good start for everyone to truly start to see what's going on. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Rowan. I think that's really good input. I think it is a time for people to be listening. Claudine, go ahead.
Hi, I echo a lot of what Rowan said, but I wanted to celebrate. This is our last meeting with SEAC, and I wanted to refocus on 3 great things that happened during this meeting. We got to celebrate what our ISS team did with their adaptability and flexibility to make sure that our children and our parents still have what they need while it was in unforeseen, chaotic, very anxiety-ridden times for most people. I'm happy that this was the time that we are celebrating the French program and including our children who are in support of ISS within the French programs, and they're not doing it based on what they think is right, but taking the time to poll families, organizations, and see what we think is needed, and then try to adapt to the program to the spoken needs. And lastly, I am so happy to receive this document, the invitation to critical courageous conversations, because it seems very useful, not just for the families that I serve, but some of the content I'll be able to take and apply to my workplace. Because as this unfolded, it was first the Americans' problem, and then it was the Indigenous problem. But the reality is the racism that is spoken about and highlighted in the American news and broadcasting happens here in Canada. We as a family are a survivor of, when I was 16, my mother was beaten up by a police officer right here at Markham Road in Finch, right? She ended up with, she's now has a record. She's been pardoned though. And it took her 10 years to replace her front tooth that he knocked out during the altercation. We've protested, marched from Queen Street to Brimley and Finch, right? But what I like about this document is it's focusing on solutions. And I think that's what we need, because it's not just a black-white problem. When I speak to other minorities that are visible, their concerns are quite similar to what happened to Blacks in the 80s, 90s, 2000, and currently, because it's still happening, right? But I'm glad that these conversations are happening, because without the work, we'll never get anywhere. So what a great way to end the year. 3 fabulous focuses for our meeting.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Again, just a thank you. Really appreciate the openness, how you each come into this as individuals, and then that commitment. I look forward to the conversation continuing. And I think where we can bring that together and look at that as the experience for us as a group and who we serve, really powerful. So I think that echoing Claudine's element of success, I think it gives us a really good jumping off point to continue with some really good deep conversations built on authentically changing the experience for our kids and our families. So thank you very much. Really appreciate the level of trust, honesty, and investment, and look forward to some conversations coming up. Just greatly appreciate being able to be in this space with each of you.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, and Rowan and Claudine, your comments are really invaluable. I think it's so important for those conversations to happen, and for people to be authentically listening. And I think that's happening right now. It sparks some very interesting conversations, and really good ones, which we may not have otherwise had. So I think that is a big success, and I think this year has been very productive as far as our SEAC goes. And before we go to, I would like to thank the Inclusive Student Services Department for the support they also provide for SEAC. One of our goals has been to raise the awareness of SEAC out in our community, and we've been very lucky that we've had that support from the board level as well. And twice yesterday when I was on my Facebook, the board notice of the SEAC meeting today popped up, and I shared it on my page too. So I appreciate that, because I think the work that we do is very good, and the more the community knows about us, the more input they can provide to us, and the more we can bring back to the table. So I think it's been a good year for that, and I look forward to that continuing into next year, into the fall. So does anybody else have any celebrations or successes before we go? Let's make sure I'm not missing anybody here. Okay, with that, our next SEAC meeting is actually scheduled now for July 7th to go over the budget at 6:30. And our following meeting from there will be September 17th, 2020. Can we get a motion to adjourn? Oh, Donna, Donna, seconder? Rowan, all in favor? Fantastic. So we'll see you all, yep, excellent. We'll see you all in July. Thank you all. Appreciate it.